present, and you're talking about the weight coach, the weight training stuff specifically. How do you see, I mean, you've commented on, the strength and conditioning comes under that umbrella. Anything specific to say about specific weight training, getting on the weights?
If it doesn't happen in a game, then it shouldn't happen in training. So, to me, I've had a lot of experience with putting in programs and avoiding injury. We used to track it at Ipswich State High School to the point where I knew in a given week of pre-season if muscles were going to tear. That's how finite we had it. All our weights, and I made sure all the conditioners did functional weights. So if you think about some of the movements, Graeme, in the game, a palm, bench press, right? Tackle technique, a squat or a deadlift. Really, the rest is embellishment. The rest is actually embellishment. You're going to have to do a bit of on the back to balance out the back and the front. But ultimately in the game, the rest is sort of embellishment. So all my programs were built around that, and I think so. For me, I'm asking my conditioners to come up with functional programs that can improve the player's game.
Do you think there's too many measurables now? Do you think we spend too much time worrying about how fast the player can run 40 metres, how much he can bench press?
Yeah, because this obsession with personal bests. Again, we are not the Olympics. We are not. We use the word athletes, but as I've said, there's footballers who aren't athletes. If you don't believe me, wait till some of the current crop retire and check in 20 years' time what they look like,
I guess you just got to look at examples like a Cameron Smith.
Yeah. I bet he doesn't win any sprints. I bet he doesn't win any strength training stuff. I bet he might do well on chins and stuff like that, but he literally looks like somebody who loves playing football, has added nuts and bolts to his game as he's gone along, studies the game, but I bet he's not the best athlete. Without knowing the ins and outs of the stats at Melbourne, I bet he's not the best.
And on the other side of that, this current crop of young, big forwards, your Payne Haas's, your Dave Fafita's, they're genetically, they're freaks, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
So that's the other side of that conditioning thing. Yeah. They are built to be that way. So and they're making really good inroads at such an early age.
Over kids who aren't well trained.
Yeah.
Because the other thing is they've all been part of systems like schoolboy systems that have trained them up to be 10k's heavier than everyone else.
Yeah.
The other thing though, again, that gets my goal is that some of the players you mentioned and others of that ilk literally could not catch and pass.
No. But so again, it's
fundamentals.
It's if we take it right back to the development stage of a player, and we spend all this time, and they're highly educated people, like they're sports scientists and that. So it's not as if though I sit here and say they have no idea what they're talking about, because they're certainly a lot smarter than I am. But if I'm purely speaking about a development thing, we don't spend enough time actually at that age thinking about body development and progression of where they're at and growth spurts and how fast one kid grows before another. Right. So we should be concentrating more on core strength
and body weight
exercises.
Pre-13, so again with my own experiences at Ippy High, we worked out over time that between age 14 and 15, we called that our boys to men year. The reason being is the boys were that good at body weight strength on the programme we had that they were sort of demanding to lift a bit. But what we did, we made sure they lifted, but under close supervision, light, excellent technique. 2 years later, you want to see some of the things they're lifting, and they're still technique perfect. And that's because we did it in a
controlled environment.
Controlled. In some of the environments, naming no names, when my back's been turned, they've gone heavy on the weights, too young, they're starting to get all sorts of injuries.
Back problems and all sorts of stuff,
Well, boys, just to wrap it up, I guess, what's the issue that, in terms of being a successful coach, how important is, that's a game, we're talking about, how important is winning to being able to get the momentum going for your coaching of a team in the season?
Why I love open forums like this, because it brings out all sorts of opinions, and I'd be lying, and I guess any coach would be lying saying winning isn't important. It's good for everyone's psyche, it makes you feel good, and again, it depends what age you're at. You live and die by your results at a certain level, like certainly NRL, Queensland Cup, exactly.
Even junior rep coaches.
Junior rep coaches.
Yeah.
But, I mean, how important is winning when, for instance, we got teams out here that are playing under 13 Div 2 on a weekend? I don't know. It just makes you feel good. It makes you believe that what you're doing has purpose behind it. But I certainly think from a start point to a finish point, you can find that in development as well, and say, well, we played this team at the beginning of the year, they beat us by 40. Our last game of the year, they beat us by 10. So again, there's certain measurable improvement. There's measurables that you can take on to that. I don't know what you think, Lee, but yeah.
I think for me that society's been diluted a little bit by the whole winning and losing dynamic. It's now, I didn't want to take it down this avenue, but Donald Trump talks all the time about winning. And it's almost like it's a dirty word to some people, winning, because he's got to be a loser. Well, you know, when I used to live in England and looked at Australia from far away, I used to see a country that used to win a lot. It used to bat above its average and win a lot. Society in general seems to be a bit more about the taking part, a bit more about the development. Participation. Well, I think the whole winning-losing dynamic, I think an important development tool is teaching a kid how to deal with victory and how to deal with a defeat. I think that's really crucial. And I think winning gives validation for all of us, but likewise, losing, if it's not dealt with properly, can be catastrophic. So a good coach can use losing and mould that as well. As we're doing this interview this morning, my football team, Manchester City, have lost a Champions League tie over 2 legs. They lost the first game 1-0, but they won this morning 4-3, but it's classed as a catastrophe.
By about a metre.
Exactly. So to me, Pep Guardiola, the manager, all he has to do is focus on the fact that they lost by that much, the tie, and they actually won this morning, and all of a sudden that psyche can totally switch, and it can affect them positively in the next game. And I think, I got told when I was at Manly and Penrith, it's not about winning, it's about developing. And I used to argue, I say, well, learning how to win is a development tool. Learning how to deal when you have won is a development tool. Learning how to avoid defeat is a development tool. And learning how to deal with a defeat is a development tool.
There's so many great quotes, I think it was Vince Lombardi said, winning's a habit, so is losing.
Yeah.
I think, bring it back to your point, I think we have become a bit of a cotton wool society as well.
Yes.
That's another great conversation to have about winning and losing, and that the resilience behind it that comes with it.
Well, let's keep going, because that's what we're here for.
I don't know, is it a pressure thing? Is it I just don't know. As a coach, I'm not a pressure coach. I don't pressure my teams to win. I know if we're well prepared and we've done what we can do, then that result's going to happen either way. And it's going to be determined in 70 minutes. And there's nothing I can do as a coach on the sideline with my walkie-talkie armed with all these fantastic stats. They're going to change that result of that game.
Yeah.
So I need to know in my own head like Lee said before, what the best action is going to be for me after the game, at half-time. How am I going to approach this 5 minutes after they don't feel like listening to me and turn that around within 1 week?
Yeah.
That's,
I think the key thing is to try and focus on processes rather than outcomes, because if you get the processes right, the outcomes will eventually look after themselves. And sometimes, I go back to when I started at Manly, we lost the first 3 games, and the pressure was on me from the club. They deny it to this day, but it was. The pressure was on me, right? But deep down, I was so confident we were going to turn it around because I knew my team were going in the right direction. It's just that I've not managed to convince everyone else in the club yet. I'd convinced my players, I'd convinced myself, I've just not convinced the spectators because I didn't really have the forum to do it. It's not like I had the media that I could talk to or whatever.
That's a really good point, right? So you're sitting there saying, I knew, and I follow your side, sleepless nights of coaches.
Yeah.
How much do you believe a coach buys into we're not hitting the panic button yet? At this stage of the season?
I think it depends. There's some coaches who say it and I think, mate, you're talking BS. There's other coaches, I think, I genuinely believe them. So this is a great conversation about coaching, right? I actually think there's some coaches who the tyres are pumped up by the media so much they've not proven themselves yet. There's other coaches that have their tyres not as much pumped up who are better than they should be. I'll give you an example. Des Hasler will never, ever, ever get a wooden spoon. Regardless of the roster he has got, he will never ever get a wooden spoon. And he was always going to improve Manly this year. He's doing a fantastic job. Ivan Cleary, there was a lot of fuss about him, and if you look at his winning and loss record and the way his teams play, all I'm saying is I'm not so sure that fuss should be made about him. Anthony Seibold at Brisbane, all I'm going to say is the jury is still out. So if you actually dissect his career and how he's done as a coach, he's not had that much longevity anywhere, and he's not had that long-term success. You could argue that he just had a good chunk of a season at South Sydney last year, and he's good at the old sound bites. So to me, the jury's still out. So I'm not saying, just to clarify, I'm not saying Seibold's a bad coach. I'm just saying the jury is still out. So Cleary, overrated. Hasler, a little bit underrated.
So let's look at the other end of that, about a major improvement, like at the NRL level. So I'm not at the NRL level, and that's okay. But from an outsider looking in, Parramatta, Brad Arthur.
Yeah.
What has Brad Arthur done so much differently in this off-season to turn that Parramatta side around to a side that now looks like, forgetting the 19-0 result on the weekend against Canberra, they look like they can win football games, and they want to win football games this year. What do you think's been that approach there?
Well, for once, there's not been something unstable happen off the field.
Yeah.
Because Brad's had a lot of that to deal with. Secondly, there's a guy called Blake Ferguson started at that club. Now, I know he's just on a wing, but he's come from a premiership winning scenario. He's an origin player. And I'll take it all the way back to 2008 when Manly won their premiership, and I was at Manly. And I said to the assistant coach, Dennis Moore, I said, "How did you win that premiership, Dennis?" He was just sat in having a cup of coffee or something. He went, "Brian Kennedy." I went, "What?" Brian Kennedy had left the club 2 years earlier, right? And he came for 1 year.
Because that was a pretty demolition job
on Melbourne in
Melbourne
2009.
that season. Yeah.
But anyway, Brian Kennedy, is it Brian Kennedy or Ben Kennedy? Ben Kennedy came 2 years before, and when the players were training at Narrabeen and they dropped the ball, they just picked the ball up and carried on. And apparently Ben Kennedy just went nuts. And don't forget, people forget as well, Des Hasler would have still been learning as a coach then too in his early days, because he came from a strength and conditioning background. Ben Kennedy apparently went nuts at whoever dropped him. And basically said, you don't ever drop the ball and just take it as you just move on. So if you drop the ball, there's a consequence. And I think Blake Ferguson has come into Parramatta. And I think as well, a few things have to sort of happen to keep the team on the paddock, and a few things have to go your way. But if you're asking me how Brad Arthur's changed, I would imagine he's stayed pretty steady with his coaching methods. But somebody like Blake Ferguson has come in and just shook up the culture a little bit, because he's come from a winning culture.
Winners win.
And winners win. And whether he's stuck on a pick and swing or he's in the middle of the action, he will have an impact on that joint.
Yeah, he's going to do a good job. Yeah.
Another player of that ilk, you have a look at Cooper Cronk when he doesn't play for Queensland, their results. So they might win a series 2-1, but quite often the game that Cooper Cronk wasn't played was the game that they lost. And look what happened when he went to the Roosters.
Oh, yeah.
So you know that can influence coaches too, like a good winner in the sheds.
Yep. Well, gentlemen, I think that's probably where we'll wrap it up for Rugby League Coach.com.
.au.
Thanks for your contribution, Steve. It's been a pleasure.
Much.
Thank you very much indeed. And Lee?
Thank you, mate. Thanks for jumping in.
Happy to be around. Good conversation. Very, very meaningful.